The coffee had gone cold again. Dr. Elena Vasquez stared at the lukewarm brown liquid in her magnetic cup, wondering if this was what excitement looked like in the deep void of space. Endless hours of monitoring subspace frequencies while slowly poisoning herself with recycled caffeine. The research vessel Meridian hummed around her with the kind of mechanical consistency that made her question whether she'd accidentally joined a monastery instead of a xenolinguistics expedition. Still nothing on channels 47 through 63, reported Lieutenant Hayes from the communications array, his voice carrying the enthusiasm of someone reading a grocery list backwards. Though I did pick up what might be whale songs from Earth. Either that, or Commander Rodriguez is singing in the shower again. Alina snorted into her coffee. 3 months into humanity's most ambitious deep space research mission, and their greatest discovery remained the acoustics of the ship's bathroom facilities. Her colleagues back at the university would be thrilled to know their star xenolinguist was spending her days cataloging the commander's questionable vocal range. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd spent 15 years developing theoretical frameworks for alien communication, published papers on the mathematical poetry of hypothetical extraterrestrial languages, and delivered lectures on the subtle art of interspecies dialogue. Now here she was, 7 light-years from home, with nothing to communicate with except Hayes's increasingly creative complaints about the food synthesizers. "Dr. Vasquez," came a voice over the intercom. "Please report to Observation Deck 3. Alina raised an eyebrow. Observation Deck 3 was typically reserved for equipment storage and the occasional existential crisis. She'd spent considerable time there herself during the first month, staring out at the star field and wondering if she'd made a terrible career choice. The corridor leading to Deck 3 stretched before her like a sterile promise, all brushed metal and softly glowing wall panels. The Meridian had been designed by committee, efficient, functional, and about as inspiring as a tax form. Alina's footsteps echoed with the hollow ring of someone walking toward either destiny or disappointment, and given her recent luck, she wasn't betting on destiny. Commander Rodriguez stood at the observation window, her usually pristine uniform slightly rumpled. Alina had never seen Rodriguez anything less than perfectly composed, which immediately activated what her grandmother used to call her trouble detector, a finely tuned instinct for when the universe was about to become significantly more complicated. "Commander, you wanted to see me." Rodriguez turned, and Alina noticed something she'd never seen in the woman's eyes before: genuine uncertainty. It was like discovering your physics professor didn't actually understand gravity, unsettling and oddly liberating. "Alina, I need you to look at something, and I need you to tell me I'm not having some kind of deep space psychological break." This was promising. Alina approached the window, half expecting to see another one of Hayes's, definitely not space debris, sightings. What she saw instead made her forget how to breathe. A ship hung in space before them, but calling it a ship was like calling the aurora borealis a light bulb. The craft seemed to grow from space itself, its hull flowing in organic curves that suggested something between a nautilus shell and a piece of living architecture. Bioluminescent patterns pulsed along its surface in rhythms that looked almost like heartbeats, and the entire structure seemed to shift slightly, as if it were breathing. "How long has it been there?" Alina's voice came out smaller than she'd intended. 14 minutes, it just appeared. No subspace signature, no energy readings, nothing. One moment we're looking at empty space, the next moment we're looking at that. Alina pressed her palm against the cool transparasteel of the window. The ship creature, entity, remained perfectly motionless relative to the Meridian matching their velocity and trajectory with impossible precision. "Have you tried communicating?" Standard frequencies, mathematical sequences, even music. Nothing. It's just sitting there looking at us. Alina studied the craft's surface patterns more closely. The bioluminescent pulses weren't random. They followed a complex rhythm, shifting through color spectrums that her eyes could barely process. There was something almost musical about the way the lights flowed across the hull, like watching a symphony written in color and motion. "Commander, I think it is communicating, just not in any way we expected." Before Rodriguez could respond, something changed. A section of the alien craft's hull began to iris open, revealing an interior that glowed with soft, pearl-like light. Alina felt her heart rate spike as a smaller vessel emerged, sleek, graceful, and clearly intended for docking. "Well," Rodriguez muttered, "I guess we're about to find out if 15 years of first contact protocols actually mean anything." Alina couldn't help but laugh, a sound that emerged with more hysteria than humor. "Commander, I've spent my entire career preparing for this moment, and right now my brain feels like it's been put in a blender with a physics textbook." The smaller craft approached with deliberate care, its movements suggesting intelligence and intention rather than automation. Alina watched, fascinated, as it aligned itself with their docking bay with precision that would have impressed their best pilots. "All hands, this is the commander," Rodriguez's voice echoed through the ship's intercom. "We have a visitor. All department heads to conference room Alpha. Dr. Vasquez, you're with me." As they walked toward the docking bay, Alina tried to remember everything she'd learned about first contact scenarios. Stay calm. Observe carefully. Look for patterns in behavior and communication. Don't make assumptions about hostile or friendly intentions. Most importantly, remember that you're representing the entire human species. No pressure. The docking bay hummed with activity as the crew prepared for humanity's first confirmed extraterrestrial encounter. Alina noticed that despite years of training, everyone moved with the slightly frantic energy of people who had suddenly realized their theoretical knowledge was about to become very, very practical. The airlock cycled with a soft hiss, and Alina held her breath. The moment stretched like elastic, filled with the weight of every science fiction story ever written, every dream of contact with other intelligences, every hope that humanity wasn't alone in the universe. The inner door opened, and Alina's carefully prepared expectations shattered like glass. The being that stepped through the airlock was undeniably beautiful, unmistakably intelligent, and surprisingly familiar. She appeared essentially human, bipedal, proportioned like a tall, elegant woman, with features that were both alien and somehow perfectly right. Her skin held a subtle luminescence, as if lit from within by starlight, and her hair flowed in shades of silver and deep blue that seemed to shift with her movements. But it was her ears that marked her as truly other. Elongated and gracefully pointed, they curved upward like delicate shells, adding an otherworldly elegance to her already striking appearance. Alina stared, her xenolinguistic training warring with the simple human response of wonder. The being's eyes met hers across the docking bay, and something extraordinary happened. She smiled. It wasn't just a smile. It was recognition, curiosity, and something that looked remarkably like amusement all rolled into a single, devastating expression that somehow conveyed more meaning than Alina's most eloquent lectures. Alina realized she was still holding her breath and made a conscious effort to resume normal respiratory function. This was it, first contact with an alien intelligence, and her primary observation was that she'd apparently developed an interstellar crush in the span of 30 seconds. Her dating life had officially become way too complicated. Alina had always prided herself on being a logical person, but logic seemed to have packed its bags and left for vacation the moment their visitor had settled into what used to be the Meridian's most boring conference room. 3 days had passed since first contact, and Alina was beginning to suspect that everything she thought she knew about communication was adorably quaint, like believing you could fix a quantum computer with a screwdriver and good intentions. The being, whom Alina had privately started calling Lyra after catching herself humming during their first successful exchange, sat across from her, with the kind of patient attention that made Alina feel like she was being gently studied by a very polite scientist, which she reflected was probably exactly what was happening. "Okay, let's try this again," Alina muttered, pulling up another holographic display of mathematical sequences. "Prime numbers seem to get your attention, but I'm starting to think you find them about as exciting as I find inventory reports." Lyra tilted her head, those remarkable ears shifting slightly, as if fine-tuning to catch some frequency Alina couldn't perceive. The subtle bioluminescent patterns beneath her skin flickered in what Alina had learned to recognize as amusement. It was deeply unsettling how easily she'd begun reading these alien expressions, as if her brain had simply decided to update its emotional recognition software without consulting her first. "Commander Rodriguez thinks I'm losing my objectivity," Alina continued, more to herself than to Lyra. "She's probably right. Yesterday I caught myself wondering if you'd like Earth coffee, which is ridiculous because I don't even know if you drink liquids, and also our coffee is terrible." The light patterns under Lyra's skin shifted to a warm golden hue, and she made a sound. Not quite musical, not quite spoken language, but something that lived in the space between melody and meaning. Alina had been recording these vocalizations, running them through every analysis program the ship's computer could manage, but the results looked like abstract art rendered in sine waves. Then Lyra did something new. She extended her hand, palm up, and the skin began to glow with intricate patterns that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. Alina stared, transfixed, as the lights formed complex geometric shapes that seemed to fold into dimensions her eyes couldn't quite follow. "Is this how you normally communicate?" Alina reached for her tablet to record the display, but Lyra shook her head and gestured toward Alina's own hand. Alina hesitated. First contact protocols had very specific guidelines about physical interaction with alien species, most of which boiled down to don't. But those protocols had been written by people who'd never sat across from a being, whose very presence seemed to resonate with something deep in Alina's chest, something that had nothing to do with xenolinguistics and everything to do with recognition. She placed her hand over Lyra's, not quite touching. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Images flooded Alina's mind, not chaotic or invasive, but gentle, like someone carefully sharing photographs. She saw vast cities that grew like coral reefs, their spires twisting toward alien suns. She felt the concept of music as a living language, where emotions could be sculpted into harmonies that built entire conversations. She understood without words that Lyra's people communicated through shared consciousness, touching minds the way humans touched hands. Alina jerked back, gasping. "That was, how did you?" Lyra's expression carried something that might have been concern, if concern could be translated across species. She made another series of musical sounds, and this time Alina caught fragments of meaning: worry, apology, hope. "You can read my thoughts," Alina said, and it wasn't a question. Lyra nodded, then made a gesture that Alina interpreted as partially or sometimes. She touched her own chest, then pointed to Alina, and the meaning became clear. The connection went both ways. "Well, this is going to make dating complicated," Alina muttered, then immediately flushed as Lyra's skin patterns shifted to what she was beginning to recognize as laughter. "Sorry, that was. Human humor doesn't translate well, does it?" But Lyra surprised her. She made a sound that was clearly— The bridge buzzed with the kind of tense energy that Alina had come to associate with very bad news delivered in very official voices. Commander Rodriguez stood at the center of it all, her expression suggesting someone who had just discovered that her carefully organized universe had been rearranged by cosmic toddlers with a taste for chaos. "Ah, Alina, perfect timing." Rodriguez gestured toward the main display, where 3 sleek Earth command vessels hung in space like metallic accusations. "It seems word of our guest has reached the wrong people." Alina felt her stomach perform what could only be described as a gravity-defying loop-de-loop. "How wrong are we talking?" Please fill out these forms in triplicate, wrong, or we're all about to become classified footnotes wrong. The second one. Lieutenant Hayes looked up from his console with the expression of someone who had spent the last hour watching his career prospects evaporate in real time. Admiral Kowalski is demanding immediate transfer of all alien technology and personnel to Earth Command's Xenological Research Division. Alina's blood chilled. She knew about XRD. Everyone in the scientific community did, though usually in the context of whispered warnings about researchers who went to work there and were never heard from again. They were the people who turned first contact into first dissection, who believed that the best way to understand alien technology was to take it apart with very sharp instruments and very little patience. They can't just commandeer our mission, Alina said, though even as the words left her mouth, she knew how naive they sounded. Earth Command could do whatever they wanted, especially when it came to matters of planetary security, their favorite euphemism for things that make politicians nervous. But actually, they can. Rodriguez pulled up the official communications on her tablet. Emergency Protocol 7. Any confirmed extraterrestrial contact becomes an immediate military matter. We're ordered to maintain current position until the boarding party arrives. Alina's mind raced. Lyra was still in the conference room, probably wondering why Alina had suddenly radiated panic through their empathic connection before disappearing. The alien woman had no idea that humanity's first response to peaceful contact was apparently to send in the people with the biggest weapons and the smallest imaginations. "Commander, you know what they'll do to her," Alina said quietly. "XRD doesn't study alien visitors. They study alien specimens." Rodriguez's jaw tightened. "I'm aware of their reputation, but we're military personnel, Alina. We follow orders even when those orders are." She gestured helplessly at the display showing the approaching ships. "Especially when those orders are backed by enough firepower to turn us into an interesting debris field." Alina stared out at the Earth Command vessels, her thoughts churning. 3 days ago, she'd been Dr. Alina Vasquez, respected xenolinguist with a comfortable academic career and a tendency to overthink her coffee choices. Now she was Dr. Alina Vasquez, the only human being in the universe who could communicate with an alien species, and possibly the only thing standing between Lyra and a very unpleasant fate involving laboratory tables and neural probes. "How long until they arrive?" she asked. 6 hours, Hayes reported. "Admiral Kowalski is leading the boarding party personally. Apparently, this is big enough to drag him out of his comfortable desk chair." Alina knew Admiral Kowalski by reputation, a man who viewed diplomacy as a form of tactical weakness, and who believed that any problem could be solved with sufficient application of military force. He was exactly the wrong person to handle humanity's first contact with an alien intelligence. "I need to talk to Lyra," Alina said. "She deserves to know what's coming." Rodriguez nodded grimly. "Be careful what you tell her, Alina. The last thing we need is our guest deciding that humanity isn't as friendly as she initially thought." Alina hurried back through the corridors, her mind spinning with possibilities, most of them bad. Could Lyra's ship escape? Probably. Did she have weapons that could defend against Earth Command vessels? Possibly. Would using them turn a peaceful first contact into the beginning of an interstellar war? Definitely. She found Lyra exactly where she'd left her, though the alien woman looked up the moment Alina entered the room, her elegant ears shifting as if tuning to Alina's emotional frequency. The bioluminescent patterns under her skin immediately shifted to colors Alina had learned meant concern and questioning. "We have a problem," Alina said without preamble. "Some humans are coming who don't understand the concept of peaceful contact. They think the best way to learn about your people is to study you intensively with instruments." Lyra's skin patterns flickered to deep red, alarm and anger. She made a sound that needed no translation, a question that roughly meant how many, how dangerous. Alina held up 3 fingers, then made what she hoped was a universal gesture for very big ships with lots of weapons. Lyra nodded grimly, then touched Alina's hand. The contact sent a flood of images through Alina's mind. Lyra's ship could indeed escape, but not without Alina. The empathic bond they developed wasn't just personal. It was fundamentally changing both of them on a neurological level. Separation now would be problematic. "You're saying I can't stay behind," Alina said, and it wasn't a question. Lyra's expression conveyed something between apology and determination. More images flowed between them. Alina saw herself in Lyra's memories, but not quite as she remembered. In Lyra's perception, Alina glowed with potential, her neural patterns shifting and adapting to accommodate new forms of consciousness. The changes were subtle but irreversible. "I'm becoming part of your species' communication network," Alina breathed. "The telepathic connection isn't just between us, it's integrating me into something larger." Lyra nodded, then shared another concept, hope. Alina's integration wasn't just a side effect, it was a gift. Lyra's people had been searching for centuries for another species capable of joining their collective consciousness. Alina was proof that humans had the potential for true telepathic communication. And if Earth Command gets their hands on you, they'll try to weaponize that potential, Alina said grimly. Before Lyra could respond, the ship's intercom crackled to life. "All personnel, prepare for incoming transmission from Admiral Kowalski." Alina and Lyra exchanged glances. Even across species, some expressions were universal, and the look they shared clearly translated to "this is about to get much worse." Admiral Kowalski's voice filled the room with all the warmth and charm of a tax audit. "Meridian, this is Admiral Kowalski aboard the ECS Determination. You are ordered to prepare the alien entity for immediate transfer to our facility. Any resistance will be considered an act of treason against Earth Command." Alina felt Lyra's skin pattern shift to what she'd learned was the equivalent of raised eyebrows. "Entity?" Alina muttered. "He's calling you an entity. That's like calling Mozart a noise-making unit." Lyra made what Alina had come to recognize as her "humans are peculiar" sound, but there was no amusement in her bioluminescent patterns now. She touched Alina's hand again, and this time the images were urgent. Her ship was preparing to phase shift, but it needed time to build up the dimensional resonance. "How much time?" Alina asked. The answer came not in images but in direct understanding. 47 minutes. Alina felt her heart sink. The Earth Command ships would be in weapons range in less than 30. "Commander Rodriguez to Dr. Vasquez. Please report to the bridge immediately." Alina looked at Lyra, who nodded toward the door. Whatever was about to happen, they would face it together. Alina was surprised by how comforting that thought was, considering she'd known Lyra for exactly 72 hours and was currently contemplating what might technically constitute the most elaborate case of defection in human history. They walked to the bridge together, Lyra's presence drawing stares from the crew members they passed. Alina noticed that Admiral Kowalski stared at Lyra with the expression of someone who had just watched his carefully organized worldview perform an elaborate tap dance before spontaneously combusting. Alina could practically see him recalibrating his entire approach to the situation, like a computer trying to process the concept of purple mathematics. "You've been able to speak English this entire time," he said slowly, as if testing the words for hidden explosive devices. "For approximately 18 hours, Lyra replied with perfect composure. "Dr. Vasquez's neural patterns are quite instructive. Your language is more efficient than I initially calculated, though surprisingly limited in emotional spectrum." Alina tried not to look too pleased with herself and failed completely. "She learned English by reading my mind, Admiral, in less than a day. I'd say that qualifies as evidence of superior intelligence, wouldn't you?" Kowalski's jaw worked silently for a moment. Alina could almost hear the gears grinding as he tried to figure out how to classify a being who could master human language faster than most humans could learn to program their coffee makers. That's impossible, he finally managed. I assure you it is not, Lyra said with what Alina recognized as barely contained amusement. Though I must admit, some of your concepts are quite puzzling. Doctor. Vasquez's memories suggest that humans often consume heated bean water to achieve mental clarity. Yet the process appears to make most individuals more agitated rather than less. Alina snorted. She's talking about coffee, Admiral, and she's not wrong. This is not a social call, Kowalski snapped, though Alina noticed he looked significantly less confident than he had 5 minutes ago. Regardless of the creature's linguistic abilities, it remains a potential security threat that must be contained and studied. Lyra's skin patterns flickered to deep amber, a color Alina had learned meant barely controlled irritation. Admiral, I must point out that your approach contains fundamental logical flaw. And what flaw would that be? You are attempting to study a representative of a civilization that has been observing your species for over 3 centuries. We are not the unknown variable in this equation, you are. The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of ship systems. Alina felt a thrill of pride mixed with terror as she watched Lyra calmly dismantle the Admiral's assumptions with the precision of a surgeon wielding a scalpel made of pure logic. Observing us, Kowalski's voice had dropped to a dangerous whisper. Yes, my people have been quite curious about your species' development. You show remarkable potential for consciousness expansion, though your tendency toward aggressive responses to the unknown has been concerning. Alina caught Commander Rodriguez's eye and saw her own thoughts reflected there. They were witnessing either the most magnificent diplomatic moment in human history or the prelude to an interstellar incident that would make first contact look like a minor misunderstanding. Are you threatening us? Kowalski demanded. Not at all. I am simply providing context. Lyra's expression remained serene. My presence here represents a significant development in my people's relationship with humanity. Doctor. Vasquez has demonstrated that individual humans can achieve telepathic integration with our communication networks. This suggests your species may be ready for the next phase of evolution. Alina felt the blood drain from her face. Lyra, what exactly are you saying? Lyra turned to her with eyes that held depths Alina was only beginning to understand. I am saying, Alina Vasquez, that you have become something new. The neural pathways we have developed together cannot be severed without significant damage to both of us. You are no longer entirely human, just as I am no longer entirely of my original species. The implications hit Alina like a cascade of cold water. The headaches she'd been experiencing, the strange dreams, the way she sometimes seemed to know what Lyra was thinking before the alien woman spoke. It wasn't just empathy. It was evolutionary adaptation happening in real time. She's been changing me, Alina said quietly, on a cellular level. And you have been changing me, Lyra replied. Your curiosity, your humor, your remarkable capacity for emotional connection. These things are now part of my neural structure. We have become something neither of our species has ever been before. Admiral Kowalski looked like a man watching his entire strategic doctrine collapse into theoretical rubble. You're saying you've infected her. I would prefer the term evolved, Lyra said dryly. Though given your species' tendency toward medical metaphors for any process you do not understand, I suppose infected will suffice. Alina found herself laughing, despite everything. Admiral, I think what she's trying to tell you is that I'm currently undergoing the most important transformation in human history, and your brilliant plan is to lock both of us in separate cages to see what happens when we're forcibly separated. It would be quite unpleasant, Lyra confirmed with what Alina was learning to recognize as massive understatement. Possibly fatal, definitely traumatic enough to convince my people that humanity is not ready for peaceful contact. The threat hung in the air like a sword made of pure diplomacy. Alina watched Kowalski process the implications, attack Lyra, and humanity lost its first and possibly last chance at joining a galactic community. Study her against her will, and risk triggering an interstellar war with a species that had been watching Earth for 3 centuries, and presumably knew exactly where all the important military installations were located. "What do you want?" he finally asked. "Permission to return home with Dr. Vasquez," Lyra said simply. "She can serve as Earth's first ambassador to my people, and I can serve as our species' first ambassador to yours. A cultural exchange, rather than a military encounter." Alina's heart performed what could only be described as interpretive dance. "You want me to come with you, to your homeworld?" "I want you to be my partner," Lyra said, and the words carried harmonics that resonated through Alina's bones. "In every sense that matters. We are already bound together, Alina. The only question is whether we explore that bond among my people or yours." Alina stared at her, this incredible being who had learned English in 18 hours, who had calmly faced down an Earth Command admiral, who had offered to share not just her mind but her entire world. 6 months ago, Alina's biggest life decision had been whether to publish her paper on theoretical xenolinguistics or wait another year for peer review. "Admiral," Alina said without taking her eyes off Lyra, "I formally request reassignment to diplomatic service." "Dr. Vasquez, you can't be serious. You're talking about leaving Earth, leaving your species for—" "For love," Alina interrupted, "and for the chance to help 2 civilizations understand each other instead of destroying each other, which, historically speaking, is not humanity's strong suit." Kowalski opened his mouth to argue, but Commander Rodriguez stepped forward. "Admiral, with respect, Dr. Vasquez is volunteering for the most important diplomatic mission in human history. And frankly, given what we've learned about their technology and their capabilities, I'd rather have them as allies than enemies. The doctor is a valuable asset. The doctor is a person," Rodriguez said firmly. "And she's making a choice that could save both of our species from a very ugly misunderstanding." Alina felt a wave